when the rappers of these coffins. He's acting like he got it, but he's lost it. Keep attacking these.
Hey, welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. It's your boy MagMongoSlade. So today we're going to talk about Austin Aries, who is apparently fucking based, at least on this subject. So wrestling websites went around snatching tweets from Twitter and making an article trying to make Austin Aries sound crazy. I'm going to read the tweets and we're all going to talk together about whether Austin Aries is crazy or not. Okay? Sounds fair, right? Austin Aries on May 12th, he said, "Stop listening to quote experts and quote leaders who have long been profiting from human sickness and suffering. I stopped listening over 20 years ago and began to educate myself on how to take my nutrition, health, wellness, and happiness into my own hands. Now 43, I think I'm doing okay. I seriously can't comprehend what the fuck has happened to our civilization this past year. The amount of fear-mongering, trauma, and brainwashing that has occurred has left a drove of people literally scared stupid, all while being convinced they're the smart, virtuous ones. Just admit it, many of you won't, don't, or can't think for yourself. You were never taught how to because the system never wanted you to. They've outsourced free thought, just like every other basic human survival tool, to make sure you remain completely dependent on them. It's amazing. And how many of the, quote, I wear my mask to protect others because I care crowd has now shifted to, quote, I got my vax, but I'm still going to wear my mask because I don't trust other people. Trying to make sense of this nonsense has become futile." So somebody responds on May 17th. Austin, I used to idolize you. Now I am upset about you. You've gone full loony. It doesn't matter what the issue is. You're just anti-government instruction. It's not the mask at all. It's not following orders you're against. And Austin Aries responds, "Damn straight. Government leaders have been lying to me since birth. I don't listen to anybody who profits from sick and sad people on what's good for my health. The system doesn't give a fuck about you. Maybe that hurts your feelings, so you choose not to believe it." All right, so let's discuss this. So the world, we're not gonna. I know he's talking about the pandemic. I don't really want to get into that, but I think in general he is correct. We obviously have to talk about the pandemic a bit in our analysis of what he's saying here. But he's talking about taking his own health and nutrition into his hands, which there is nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong with that from the perspective of other people. And that's what he's saying. He's saying other people are saying you're not allowed to take your own health and wellness into your hands. You have to surrender to the experts. Surrender to the experts what is the experts. Give them their due. To which he is saying, well, I could take care of myself. It's my body. And whatever happened to my body, my choice in terms of this whole vaccination mask thing. It just kind of went out of the window. That's kind of flown away. Doesn't make any sense. But that's another one of those things that we could talk about that doesn't make any sense. But he's talked about the amount of fear-mongering and trauma and brainwashing. This is absolutely true. When most people still get their information from television, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, etc. When every time you turn on your television, you're being inundated with this is the most lethal virus in such and such years, or it's called the mean world syndrome, right? The mean world syndrome, it came from, I can't remember the guy's name, but he created this concept that people, through watching the media, you will believe that the world is a nastier, meaner place than it really is, right? And he says that because, the media selectively presents information. So to give you a pretty benign example that has nothing to do with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, something like crime. Like if every night you turn on the news, there's a murder, right? You will tend to believe that there are murderers all over the place. If there's rapes on TV, every time you turn the TV on, every time you watch the news, you will tend to believe that there is an absurd amount of rape going on in your neighborhoods. That's the mean world syndrome. That's people trying to, it's a manipulation tactic. Sometimes people don't know that they're doing it. They're just following the stories. But when you look at the real statistics and the real issues, it's not that many rapes. It's not that many robberies, and that's really kind of what ended up happening from this virus thing is when people started looking at the numbers, they were like, wait a minute, the overwhelming number of people who get the virus survive. Why are we still locked in our houses? And then it's shut up, listen to the science, shut up, trust the science, shut up, do what they tell you to do, you know? But you're like, the overwhelming number of people who are going to get sick are going to be fine. You know, like, sure, some people are going to die, but that's always going to be the case. Some people get pneumonia and die. Some people get a cold and die. It happens. Some people get infections from basic scratches and they die or lose a leg or something. Like, that's the risk of running around in the world, you know? And some people are just been like, shut up, shut your mouth, just follow directions. And yes, the fear mongering. They'll say, we can't go back to our lives because you won't wear a mask. We can't go back to our lives because you won't get the vaccine. We can't go back to our lives. Wait a minute. We can go back to our lives? Well, I'm going to wear a mask anyway because I don't want to be seen as a Republican. I'm going to wear a mask anyway because you might not be vaccinated. You might be lying. So we've gone from, and when the CDC said, okay, you don't need to wear a mask indoors or outdoors anymore, that it became, well, we don't trust the science anymore. Trust the science, trust the science, trust the science. The science says something different than what they want to hear. Don't trust the science anymore. Right? So then he started saying about, people, the system has taught you not to think for yourself. This is a completely different situation right here because this is about public schools. There's a reason why states are now trying to stop, homeschooling. California has pretty much banned it. I don't think it's banned outright, but they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to get rid of private schools. They're trying to get rid of religious schools. They're trying to get rid of anything that will teach a counter narrative to what they want you to believe. If the government didn't want to control you, why would they care what you learn? Why would they care? If you can't read, why does the government care? You're not going to get a job that puts you in position to control anybody else's life if you can't read. So if you can't read, who cares? You can't count, who cares? It's not like you're automatically going to be an engineer and then you can't count and can't read. And then you're going to, a bridge is going to collapse. You're never going to get the job in the first place because you can't read or write. So why does the government care whether you read or not? Because the government cares about what you read, not whether you can read, because there's a lot of people running around here who can't read. Floyd Mayweather couldn't read. So there that is. They want to be able to control what you read. So you'll have, certain books that won't get published or they won't get supported. But generally, when he says that you've outsourced free thought, that's what he's saying. Like, you getting information from fucking John Oliver, or, these are supposed to be comedians. John Oliver is supposed to be a comedian. Why is he giving you the news? Why is he giving you a spin on what is going on in the world? What the fuck does he know? He's a comedian. What about that other dweeb? The brown one. What the fuck is his name? The South African guy. Like, who is he to be delivering vital information through Comedy Central? Who the fuck is this guy? You're supposed to outsource your thinking to them because the years of Jon Stewart doing it and Stephen Colbert doing it, years of like Walter Cronkite, and now you got Rachel Maddow and that other dweeb. What's the fuck his name? Don Lemon or whatever the fuck. All these people who are thinking on your behalf. You're correct if you think what they think. Otherwise, you're a loony bin. And that's really what the wrestling journalists are saying here is, well, this guy deviated from the path of, what every major media thing says. Nobody ever asks, like, why do all these people think the same thing about complex issues, about super complex issues? Pandemic response is a ridiculously complex issue. Why did everybody have the same response? How about that question? Nobody has that question. Why did nobody ask why some of the biggest supporters of these TV networks are pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, like Johnson & Johnson? Nobody ever brought that up. So, and it's like, there's a lot of things that come up that people talk about that if you say it, you sound crazy, right? Like Tom Cruise, right? He's a Scientologist. Scientology is not all there. But one of the things that he talks about is the mental health industry. He talks about how people shouldn't be taking all of these pills and everything, right? And that's a good point. Why don't we ever talk about the role that people being fed pills takes in school shootings, for instance, you know, or people being overprescribed medications for being a boy? There's an entire article, maybe I'll do a video on it, about over medication of boys, because they feel like boys have attention deficit disorder because they like to move around so much. But it's really just the abundance of testosterone in their system. Boys are not girls. You know, girls will sit still for hours and hours, watch TV, play silently to themselves. Boys will bang things against the wall and run around and jump off stuff because they're busybodies. But when you're told that this is how your child should behave, and then if your child is not behaving that way, pump them full of pills, and then your child turns around and starts shooting up his school, or he suffers from crazy depression. Like, why do we have so many mental health problems that are going on in this country now? You know, and simple things. Let's talk about something else that's real simple. Birth control. Like, we just become so normal that when our girls become 14, 15 years old, we pump them full of birth control. Nobody ever says, like, hey, maybe that's not a good idea. Nobody asks what the hell that is. What is in this birth control that you're giving my daughter? Is it going to have an adverse effect to her body? It does. It does. Now, I can't tell you whether to do it or not, but I can tell you that if somebody gives you a pill, it's the purpose of the pill is to change something in your body. If this pill, this birth control, is sterilizing your daughter, which is the point, is to prevent her from getting pregnant. What else is it doing? Then we find out that, oh, it's a steroid. So it might make her muscular, it might make her gain some weight. And then you find out in the black community, there's a lot of fat black girls. A lot of them are on birth control. They're not eating right anyway. Let's, just get correct with it. But a lot of them are on birth control. It has like this weird, it creates this testosterone imbalance in their body. So now they got bad skin. They got bad tempers. There's a lot of stuff going on. I hope I'm not completely off base when it comes to this birth control thing, because that was kind of like off the top of my head. But there's a lot of things that we give kids, and that we pump full of our children, that we're not thinking about tomorrow, about what's going to happen to them tomorrow. Like getting your kids to take meds that they might not need, instead of implementing structure into their lives, we're just pumping them full of meds. We're giving them meds and popping them in front of the TV. We're not asking questions. You're not allowed to ask that question. You're not allowed to ask whether these pharmaceutical companies have any type of say on what is said on these networks. No, you're not allowed to ask that question. Like I said, I stopped trusting the dietary industry, and I'm not saying that you don't trust them. I'm just saying, me personally, when I found out that Mars candy bars were giving money to the pharmaceutical companies and Pepsi, like sugary drinks and candy bars are helping to fund the dietary associations. So they're not going to tell you straight up not to drink Pepsi and eat candy bars. They're going to say, oh, just do it in moderation. Just do it in moderation. What does that mean? Just say no. You can't, but you can't just say no, because the people who are funding you are going to continue to fund you. So you're going to say, well, do it in moderation. And then there was all these laws that say you can't give dietary advice. I think North Carolina was one of those states where you can't give dietary advice, whether on the internet or in person, without a license. Now you can feel how you want to feel about that. But if somebody says, hey, this is what I did to free myself from diabetes, or I had a heart condition and this is what I did to turn it around, and then they try to arrest that person for giving somebody advice, like, does that sound rational to you? No. It's up to me, the person who is hearing the advice, to decide whether that makes sense or not, and whether I want to do it or not. Why would the government care that me and this guy are having a conversation about dietary supplements, or whether we should eat candy bars and drink Pepsi? Why does the government care? Why does the government need to have control over that? That's a good question. You know? So I'm not saying that Austin Aries is completely right about everything. You know? I don't know what else crazy things he might have said. But I know on this subject, he ain't entirely wrong. And it's not just the masks either. You have to ask, like, whenever the government said they're going to get involved in something, you have to ask why. You know? And then you have to ask why they choose to get involved with this thing and not this thing. Case in point. The Biden administration are now going to start talking about targeting United States citizens. This has led all these people. Jim Cornette is another one. I was going to make a separate video about this, but I decided not to. I'm just going to talk about it here. He comes with this, the enemy is us. 50% of the country are crazy deranged terrorists. Or whatever the fuck he said. The Republicans are crazy deranged terrorists because of January 6th. And it's like, we've had over a year of riots in places like Portland, of burnt buildings being burned, government buildings, police buildings, private homes, all across the country. All of that stuff is being completely ignored. And if you say anything about it, people say it doesn't exist, it didn't happen. But when it comes to January the 6th, we're going to turn the whole entire Homeland Security Department on American citizens because they crashed a cathedral, otherwise known as the Capitol building. It's a temple. It's a place of worship. It has to be. Otherwise, me throwing a brick through your jewelry store should get the same response. But it doesn't. Me stealing all your shit, setting all your shit on fire. There's people running down the streets in Portland with knives trying to kill each other. It's an absolutely deranged place. Nobody talks about it. You're not allowed to talk about it at all. Chicago is a shooting ground where black people are dying every weekend. Dozens of black people die in Chicago. There is no march, no Black Lives Matter. Nobody's trying to go down there and figure out what's going on. There ain't no Sean King and no Patrice Cullors, and nobody's going down there. Nobody cares. So you have to ask the question, why does the government get involved in one thing and not another thing? Why does the government care about this but not this? Right? Why does the government care whether you can read or not? That's a good question. And I'm not trying to tell you any answers. I'm just riffing off the top of my head. You could choose to disagree and say, I'm a loony bin. You can do that. That's fine. But I'm pretty sure I'm not. You know what I mean? It is what it is. There's a lot of people out here who are miseducated, scared. They're miseducated and then we'll talk about their degrees. There's people out here, and I'm going to say it because it needs to be said, who think men can get pregnant. Educated people with PhDs, the experts, the world leaders telling you men can get pregnant. Does that make sense to you? Why would you listen to those people? Somebody walks up to you and says something absolutely foolish like that, and you're going to start trusting them on stuff? Like, obviously, bro, fucking barefoot Native Americans with feathers in their hair had more sense than that. The most backwards, don't have fire African tribe can tell men from women. And you got these people walking around in suits with degrees on the wall telling you men can get pregnant. Get the fuck out of here.